Okay, so in this section we are going to see how we can make asynchronous call inside Redux. And by asynchronous call, I mean if you want to get any data from public API, or if you want to make an query in your database through API, in that case you need to perform some asynchronous operation, and how you can handle this inside Redux. So that is what we are going to learn in this section. So let's move back to the add node component. Okay, so currently we are creating a function inside this map dispatch to props, which is dispatching an action object. Now we cannot make any asynchronous call inside this add new node function. We need to create a separate function. So I'll create a separate function to add new node. So const add new node, and this will get the data. And now to make any asynchronous call, we need to execute an asynchronous function. So let's create an asynchronous function which will be anonymous, and then async. Okay, and then in this function I'll perform some asynchronous stuff. So asynchronous stuff db or API, and then I'll dispatch my action, this one. And now as we are going to pass this add new node to the connect function, connect will pass the dispatch function to the inner function. So I can get this as a parameter. Cool. Okay, so pass this add new node to map dispatch to props, add new node, and just comment it out. Cool. Now tell me, will this work? Because according to Redux, action should return an object, not a function. As I am executing a function here, so it should not work. Let's see. Let's create a node, my node, add node, expected. So it says action must be plain objects, use custom middlewares for asynchronous actions. So it is basically saying it is against Redux protocol. If you really want to execute a function inside this action creator, you need to pass a middleware. So what middleware does, middleware offers you to call a function inside this function. Well, this type of function is called action creator because it is ultimately dispatching an action, but using middlewares you can call a function inside this action creator. So let's import a middleware. Go to store.js inside this Redux. Remember, we have also installed Redux Thunk, so if you have not installed Redux Thunk, please install that. We are going to use Redux Thunk middleware. Import Thunk from Redux Thunk, and then create an array of middleware, because you might have multiple middlewares and you can just put this in an array. Thunk. And now to import this, there is a nice little function provided by Redux called apply middleware, and then you can just pass this inside store. But we are also using Compose with DevTools so that we can visualize the Redux store. So you just need to pass this inside Compose DevTools. Make sure you are wrapping this. So apply middleware, and then use the spread operator to copy all these middlewares. Okay, cool. And let's see a quick diagram how middleware works. That's a really simple diagram. So what we have seen, from a React component we can create an action and that will eventually hit the reducer. But by introducing a middleware, you need to go from action creator to reducer through a middlewares, and then through this middleware you can make some API call, some database query, and then prepare the data, and then ultimately dispatch an action to the reducer. Okay, let's see. Now the issue should be solved. Let's create a node, new node, add node. Look at this. And now I'll move this action creator function to a separate file. So inside Redux I'll create another folder which is actions, and then inside actions I'll name this nodes.actions action.js. So this file will contain all the actions related to the nodes. Cool. And then cut the function from this create node. Okay, go to nodes action, paste this, just export this out. Then we just need to import this in create node. This should be auto imported. Nope, not a problem. I don't need this store, by the way. Import add new node from redux / action / nodes action. Let's see if this is working fine or not. Yeah, nice. Okay, cool. And now with ES syntax we can also remove this function from this, and asynchronous dispatch, use an arrow function. Cool. And by the way guys, we are not making any asynchronous call here. We are going to make this in the next section where we are going to connect this with Firebase database. Anyway, that's how you can make an asynchronous call inside Redux. Okay, let's do the same for toggle important feature. So go to node.js. Okay, here I am getting this toggle node from this app component. So if I go to this app and I'll put this toggle node function inside Redux store, just cut this out, go to nodes.accent.js. I'll create a separate function, export const toggle node. Okay, I'll just comment this now. I need to save this to a reducer where all the logic happens. Okay, so inside toggle node I'm getting the ID, and then it will execute a function which is also getting the dispatch as a parameter, and then it will call dispatch. The type is, what should I give? Toggle node, and then the payload, of course the ID. And now we'll go to a reducer to catch this accent type. So just cut this out, go to nodes reducer, and okay, inside this I'll make another switch case. The type name was toggle node, right? Toggle node. Okay, inside this I'll paste this, just uncomment this. Okay, so I need to change something. First of all, new nodes is equal to nodes.slice. I need to change this nodes. Okay, so my nodes array is previous state dot nodes. Remember, this is coming from this initial state nodes, and initial state I am passing this to previous state. So previous state dot nodes.slice, it will give me a new copy, and then I'm getting the index of that node. I'm getting the node from that index. I'm creating a new node. I need to change something here. Is important, is node dot is important, fine. Okay, and then new node index is new node. I'll not do this set nodes. Instead I will return a new state. Return, first of all, copy everything from the previous state, and then the nodes, new nodes. And what's the ID, by the way? It is the payload, so it is coming as the payload. So if you are confused, if I go to nodes.accent, look at this, I'm getting the ID as the payload. So I'm just getting that payload, and that's all. And now go to node.js and connect this component with a Redux store. So for that, import connect function. If it all seems confusing, please watch the last video. Connect, and this will return a function, higher order function, which will eventually wrap our component. And then I need to pass here two parameters. First one is map state to props. In this case I don't need to read anything, so put null, and then map dispatch to props. Put the function toggle node. Also I need to import this toggle node. So if I go to the top, import toggle node from /redux/accent/nodes-accent, and then it will be available as a property. So if in this node I can destructure this toggle node, so this is already destructured, and then on click on this button I am going to call this toggle node and pass the ID. Okay, so again let me tell you what's going to happen. This toggle node function is available as a property in this node component as we have passed this toggle node inside this connect. So on click on this button, it will trigger this toggle node and pass the ID. It will go to nodes.accent where the function is defined, and it will get the ID. It will also get the dispatch as it is passed through connect, and then here it will make some asynchronous call, and then it will dispatch this action with a type toggle node and payload ID. And then Redux will check the nodes reducer. It will match the case. In this case toggle node is matched. It will get the payload, which is the ID, and get the node, perform some operation, and then return a new state. So that's what's going to happen. Okay, now to render important nodes, let's go to important nodes component and modify this component. Okay, so first of all, so connect the component, auto import it from React-Redux. Okay, wrap the component, and I'll create a function called map state to props. It will get the state through connect, and then I need the nodes from the state, so state.nodes, and I'll get this as nodes, and then I'll pass this map state to props in this connect. I don't need map dispatch to props, so I can leave that blank, and then these nodes will be available as the property, and then I can map over it. And by the way guys, this toggle node function is not needed because we were making this property drilling when we made this app using pure React. So just remove this, also remove this, as toggle node is available directly from the Redux store to this node component. And now before testing this, I will go through this whole app to check if I am sending any unnecessary properties. So I don't need this create node, as I have declared an add new node in my Redux function in my Redux store. I don't need this state, I don't need this console log nodes, and inside this important nodes I am not going to pass any of the properties. Toggle node, no way. Just look at this, how clean our components are. Go to create node. Okay, inside this create node I am getting this add new node through connect, and everything seems okay. If I go to important nodes, I'm getting these nodes as it is passing through connect, nice. And if I go to all nodes, I don't need the store, and then inside nodes I'm mapping over every node, I'm passing the node, and I don't need this toggle node, and just go to node.js. I'm getting this toggle node through connect. Okay, fine, let's see. So let's create a new node, add node, add to important, nice. Add to important, I am node 3, remove from important, cool. So we are making this call through Redux middlewares, but we are not actually implementing any asynchronous stuff. So in the next section I will be implementing Firebase to store this data in our database, and for that we need to make some asynchronous call. So in the last section we had introduced Redux Thunk to know about how middleware works and what's the need of middleware in Redux, but we did not really perform any asynchronous functions, right? So in this section we are going to connect our app with Firebase and do some asynchronous stuff using Redux middlewares. But before that, just go to your app, and I need to talk about couple of improvements we can make in our Redux app. So the first one is, you probably have multiple reducers in your app. So in that case you need to combine those reducers and pass a single reducer to the store. So far we have only one reducer, this nodes reducer, but you might have some other reducers like authentication reducers or profile reducers. So to combine those reducers, Redux gives us a function which is combine reducers. So just import this from Redux, and then you need to create a root reducer. So const root reducer, then call combine reducers, and just pass the object. Remember, you need to pass an object here, so nodes reducer. And if you have some other reducers, you can just pass this like auth reducer, you can just pass this like this, and then pass this root reducer to the store, nice. And now you will face an error, and this is because earlier we had only one reducer, but now our state is divided into some sub reducers. So we need to get the data from state.nodes reducer and then nodes. So we need to change something in our code. So wherever we are getting the data, so all nodes, okay, see all nodes, and here in map state to props we need to get the data from state.nodes reducer dot nodes, and same for important nodes. So important nodes here, let's see, fine. And the second one is, put every accent type in a constant. And with that approach, if you need to modify the accent type someday, you can just need to modify that constant. So just create a file in Redux, types.js, and just grab all those accent types. So first one is add note, let's copy this, const add note is equal to add note, and then the second one is toggle note. So I'll be using multi cursor toggle note. Just export this out, export, and I'll just import this wherever this accent type is needed. So in this switch case, in place of hard-coded string, I'll put add note, and this would be auto imported from types, yeah. And then in place of toggle note, just replace this with toggle note, yeah. And we also need to modify that accent file. So nodes.accent, here is hard-coded toggle note replaced by that constant, and here in place of add note replace this with constant. Nice. Okay, so now let's set up Firebase. So go to firebase.google.com and just log in and go to console and then add project. Name of the project, I'll name this note app. Continue. I'll not be using this Google Analytics, so create project. Okay, now we need to create an app, so click on this web and name this app note app. Click on this hosting if you want to host this app in Firebase. By the way, this hosting is really easy in Firebase. And register app. Click on next, next, and continue to console. Okay, so let's talk about this database. So go to Cloud Firestore. Click on Cloud Firestore and then create database. Start in test mode, we'll come back later. Next. Then if you want to change your location, it will affect your timestamp. I'll just leave this default, then enable. Okay, so the Firebase Firestore is a NoSQL database. It means you have collection, and in that collection you have documents, and in those documents you can store data in JSON format. And if you are coming from SQL, you can just compare the collection with tables and those documents with rows. Okay, so let's create a collection. I'll name this notes. So collection ID notes. Next, and then document ID, auto generated ID. So I'm creating a note and the name of the field is note. Value just hard coded, I am a note. I'll be deleting this in a second. And then what are the other fields? Is important. So is important, it is a boolean type, and then the value is false by default. And then another field, date, and it's a string, not timestamp, cause we are giving our own customized date. And then the value is 20/10/20, and then save. So you have one data with Firebase generated ID and those three fields. Okay, so that's how Firebase stores your data. You have a collection, and inside collection you have a document, and in that document you have all those data. So I'm going to delete this collection. Delete. I'll create this from our React app. So notes, delete. Cool. Now let's connect this Firebase app to our React app. So go to project settings, and here click on this config and just copy the data. Okay, let's move to your React app and create a file in source, name firebase.js. Just paste this configuration object, and you also need to install an npm package named Firebase. So just install that. So npm I Firebase. So let it install. Okay, so successfully installed. Now import the Firebase from Firebase. Import Firebase from Firebase. Cool. Oops, cool. And now to connect this using Firebase, so Firebase dot initialize app, and then pass this configuration object. So Firebase config. Cool. And now get access to the Firestore database at firebase.firestore, and it will return a reference, and just put this in const db and just export this out. So export const db. Cool. Okay, so let's implement our first asynchronous call, and we are going to add data in our Firebase database. Okay, so let's go to nodes action, and here in add new node, here we are going to perform all those asynchronous stuff. So first of all, get the database. So this should be auto imported from our local Firebase file db, and then create a collection. So db.collection, and then the name of my collection is notes, and notice that we have already deleted the notes collection. So this notes collection is not there, so Firebase will automatically create that collection if that collection is not there, and then you can just call add and then pass the data. That's it. But with this approach there's a problem. If you add data using .add, Firebase will automatically generate the document's ID, but we don't want that. We want to give our own ID, the ID we had generated using .random. So in create node, remember this ID we had generated, so you want to give this ID to our document. So just remove .add and put doc and then set the ID. So data.id, and it should be a string, so .toString. Nice. And then to add a data in .set and just pass the data. That's it. And this will return me a promise. So await. And now for exception handling in asynchronous call, we need to use try catch block. So try catch and just put this here. Okay. And inside catch, just log out the error.message. Nice. And then after getting this data, we need to dispatch this. So Ctrl X, paste, and with the payload data. Nice. So let's see. Let me just zoom this in. Okay. So database node, database node, add node. Nice. So our node is added, and we can verify that in our database. So go to Cloud Firestore. And look at this, a collection is created, nodes, and the document ID is 55, which is randomly generated, and all these data, date, ID is important, and note. Nice. Okay, so move back to your app and let's now refresh this app. Look at this. So you are not currently getting those data which are stored in our database, right? And these three nodes, these are coming from the initial state. So just delete that nodes, those initial nodes. Go to nodes reducer, and here just delete this because it was just for testing purpose and an empty array. Okay, so now just refresh this. Look at this, we don't have any nodes here. So you need to create a function that will get all the nodes from the database and then dispatch an action to a reducer. So let's go to nodes action and let's create that action creator here. Nodes action, okay, here. So export const, let's name this load nodes, and this will get the dispatch, and this function is also asynchronous. Okay, cool. The font was a bit smaller, I guess. Anyway, let's create a try catch block as we're going to perform some asynchronous stuff here. And then, so first of all, get the nodes collection. So for that, db.collection, the name of my collection is nodes.get, and this will return me a snapshot which will contain all the data related to this collection, and I'll put this in a snapshot. So const snapshot, and it will also return a promise. So await. Nice. And then we need to extract those data from the snapshot. So snapshot dot docs will contain all our documents, and then we can just map over it, and for every doc we can just get the raw data using doc.data. Okay, so docs is an array, and then we can just map over it and get those raw data, and this will also return me an array, and I can just put this in all nodes. So const all nodes. Cool. And then we can just dispatch an action here with this all nodes as payload. So let's do that. Dispatch type, let's name this load nodes, and we need to put this in a constant. So go to types, let's copy this, and I'll be using multi cursor. Name this load nodes. Okay, so our type is ready, and just import this in nodes action. So type load nodes, it should be auto imported, and the payload is all nodes, right? Yeah. And then go to reducer to catch this action, create another case here, case again, this is load nodes, this should be auto imported, and then return, so return a new state and copy everything from the previous state, and then override the nodes. So nodes to payload. Nice. So this nodes is our array which holds all our nodes. So I'm overwriting this, and now we need to dispatch this action creator in our app. So when the page refresh, I should dispatch this, right? So we need to dispatch this function whenever the app renders first time, means whenever the component mounted. So use an use effect, it should be auto imported from React, and then call a function. It should be triggered on an empty dependency array. It means it should be triggered only when the app loads first time. And now dispatch this action creator. So there are a couple of ways to dispatch this action creator. Either you can connect this app component using connect method provided by React-Redux, or you can just directly dispatch this using store. So I am just going to dispatch this using store. So store, and it should be auto imported from Redux store. Look at this, and store dot dispatch, and the name of my action, I need to import that, import dot slash redux slash action slash nodes action, and then this is load nodes, yeah, and just dispatch this load nodes, call this. Nice. Let's see. Okay, look at this, refresh the page, and look at this. It takes a little bit time and we can handle that using loader, but okay, our app is working fine. So let's now implement this toggle important feature. So whenever I'm clicking on add to important, it should be added to important nodes. And by the way guys, if you are thinking that this is already implemented, no, this is in local state. Okay, just refresh this and this is gone. Okay, so let's now implement this. Okay, so let's go to nodes action. Yeah, in this toggle node. So here from the database we need to first get that node which has this ID. So that's why we have also customized our ID and set our own ID in our document. Okay, so let's first get that node. So for that again I'll put this in a try catch block. So first of all get the snapshot from that collection. So const snapshot using db.collection, the name of my collection is nodes, and here I will get the snapshot of the document, and snapshot means all the data related to the document. So here data.id, and remember it should be a string, so .toString, cool, and it should not be data, it should be just ID. Yeah, and then from the snapshot get the raw data using snapshot.get, and this will return me a promise, so await, and then I can wait for that promise to be resolved and then get the data, or I can use an iffy, which is immediately invoked function, and using that I can just get the data. Okay, and I'll store the data in data, so const data, and now let's update the document. So snapshot dot update, and then you can just pass the property whichever you want to modify. So in this case this is important, and you want to toggle it, right? So not data, and data is all that raw data of that node, and data dot is important, and this will also returns me a promise, so await. Yeah, that's it. And then after all this implementation on database, I'll dispatch this action so that our reducer also gets updated. So let's go to our app, click on add to important, and it is added to important, and just refresh this. Look at this, nice. Just zoom this out and then create another node. So another node, add node, nice, add to important, refresh this, nice. And you can see this delay, this slight delay, and this is because we are getting the data from the database, and we can handle that using a loader. So let's do that. So the idea is, in our reducer I'll create another variable named loading, okay, inside state, and the loading is, let's say, default false, and at the start of our asynchronous call I'll set this to true, and when the asynchronous call finished I will set this to false. So that's the idea. So inside this add new node, dispatch another action inside this try. So at first dispatch something like set loader. So go to types.js and create another type set loader. Nice. Go to node section and set the type set loader. Why auto import is not working? So we need to manually import this. So set loader, just import this here. Nice. And the payload, we don't want any payload. Okay. And in reducer, just catch this action. So here I'll match, so at the top case set loader, it is auto imported, I guess. Yeah. And then return, just copy everything from the previous state, and the loading is true. And then after getting the data or adding the data in the database, I am firing a dispatch with a type add node, right? So go to nodes reducer, inside add node, I'll copy everything from the previous state, and I'll also override this loading. So loading false, and I'll also copy this in toggle node. So here loading is equal to false, load nodes, loading is equal to false. Nice. So go to node section and dispatch this loader also in toggle node. At the start dispatch set loader, and also in load nodes dispatch set loader at the start of the function. Now we can use this to render a loader component, but before that just go to your Redux extension and just see if it's working fine or not. Go to your Redux. Okay, look at this. Currently our loading is false, so just add a note, my note, add note. Look at this, loading is true and then loading is false. So set loader is fired, and then when add node is fired, the loading is false. Nice. So now we can show a loader component. So go to your app.js, and here after create node, I'll show a loader. I'll be using a bootstrap loader. So div.spinner border, the name of the class name, and then I want to give a vertical margin, so my3. Now look at this. If I refresh, okay, so our loader is in action, and now we need to render this conditionally. So first of all, we need to get that loading from the Redux store. So for that we need to connect our app with the Redux store. So connect, auto imported from React-Redux, and then it will return a function that will wrap our app. Okay, and then const map state to props to read data from the state, and it will get the state from that connect function, and then here it will return an object. And what I need, basically loading, right? And I can get the data from state.nodes reducer, remember, reducer dot loading. Okay, and just pass this map state to props to connect. We don't need to pass map dispatch to props because we are dispatching an action, but we are dispatching using store.dispatch. Okay, so here I need to render this conditionally. So I'll be using a curly braces. If the loading is true, then only I will render this spinner. And I also need to destructure this. Oh, how can I forget this? So just destructure this in app properties. Nice. Let's see. It's showing a loader. Nice. And I want to place this loader horizontally centered. So for that, go to your code and wrap this using a div with a class name textCenter. Oops, textCenter, and just wrap this, convert this to a self-closing tag, and then put this here. Let's see. So our loader is in center. Nice. Okay, so here's another point, guys. You are actually repeating some code, and let me show you. So to implement that toggle important feature inside this nodes reducer, you are actually writing some logic to implement that toggle important feature inside local state, right? And then also in nodes action, you are writing some code to implement that logic in our database. Now we can get rid of that nodes reducer. Okay, so we can just get rid of that case toggle node. So just comment this out, and inside nodes action, Instead of dispatching this toggle node, just remove this. You can just dispatch that load nodes function, because it is ultimately getting all those nodes from the database and you will get that updated data, right? So you can just fire this load nodes function here. So dispatch load nodes, call it. Nice. Let's see. Yeah, just remove from important. Nice. Look at this, and refresh this. It's working fine. So that's it. We have converted a pure React app to a React-Redux app, and this app is also connected to Firebase. If you like the way I make videos, please hit the like button. And if you are new to this channel, I make videos on web development and web designing. So if it sounds interesting, please consider subscribing the channel. So that's it. See you in the next video. Bye.